And when Yahweh says, what I have in mind to bring you guys back to, when I bring you back, apparently is now, is going to be better than the days of your forefathers. Better than what Abraham saw. Better than even Joseph sitting as vizier of Egypt, having to be in disguise as Zaphnath-Paneah. Better than the days of David and even Solomon. We have in front of us this opportunity, and the only way to have our eyes opened is to ayin dalet, ayin tav. That's why we're doing this.
Break just a minute.
Yep.
Somebody else needs to do this. My arm is totally in
Don't
span.
close the door.
No, I'm not going to close it.
How many minutes you got? Oh, can you do it, Donald?
Hey, did you turn off the button?
Nope, it's still going.
It's still going. Okay. Does anybody else have anything they want to say as long as we flip a moment? No comments? To me, this is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Keep going. I love it.
Did you refer to the Dalet as Yeshua in previous teachings?
Yes, but see, Yeshua rather cryptically described himself as the Dalet. He said, I'm the door, no one gets to the Father but through me. So what I'm saying is, one way to do this sleuthing, this cryptology work of looking at Hebrew, is you have to take every little thing that you think is like, oh yeah, that's just a metaphor. I'm the door. Ask Jesus in your heart, then you get to the Father's throne and come boldly before the throne of grace. It's like, whoa, back up, back up. We need to suspend, to a certain degree, all the teachings that came from the one-eyed pirate who can only see certain things, and suspend the teachings from the other guy, because both of them are trying to poke out the good eye of the other one. Wait a minute. We need to rethink, reconsider, with the perspective of both eyes, which gives us this three-dimensional, how does this work? Where the two are not in conflict trying to destroy each other, but the two are seeing aspects giving us this three-dimensional view, such that that three-dimensional view agrees, brings into agreement the Spirit, the Torah, the Mashiach, and the Creator, what He built into nature. And when I say the Mashiach, it's not just, oh, that guy who lived 2,000 years ago. Here's a little trick to understand what I'm saying. How do we know that that man who lived 2,000 years ago is God? This is from a Christian perspective, as I was taught. It's like, well, he walked on water. He rose from the dead. He healed the sick. What more do you need? Well, He Himself said, hey, everything you see me doing, you guys are going to be doing it even greater. But does that mean you're God? No. Well, then that means Him doing those miracles disqualifies Him from the deity status, because that's human status. He was behaving the way a man of Israel should behave. Raising the dead, healing the sick, walking on water. When's the last time any of us did that?
In January.
You did it in January, okay. You walked across the frozen lake? We actually did that up in April, I think it was, in Canada. Anyway, the point is, why haven't we been doing it? Because we've been asleep with our eyes closed, doing not what He said, because for the last 2,000 years, we had both, one eye or the other closed, and if we can't do it until we are doing what He did, He said, I only do what I see my Father doing, pious religious orthodoxy, and I only say what I hear my Father saying. Gee, everything in agreement, and we've not done that yet. So I expect that what's in front of us is doing the same things Yeshua did, and even greater, just like He said. It's just up until now, we haven't qualified to do so, because we haven't done what He said to do. So, here's the boat, the pickle of fish that we've been in. I'm mixing metaphors there on purpose.
Did not our hearts burn on the way to Emmaus?
He's quoting from when Yeshua came back and was telling him the truth, and he said, something within us told us this was right, and we couldn't put it together until he broke the bread and said, see, it's like, whoa! An interesting thing, the word for tree, like a tree, is ayin zadi. Etz, pronounced E-T-Z. But it also means to take counsel. Well, look at, here's a similar pattern. Ayin dalet, ayin tav, there's an ayin zadi. So if this means comprehend the door, and that's kind of comprehend the terms of the covenant, what is this? Comprehend the resurrection? Because the zadi in the pattern that I showed you of the Mishkan is like Yeshua resurrecting from the dead. Is it Yeshua resurrecting from the dead? I'm suggesting that this Vav is Israel. This Vav is you, a person. This Vav is Mashiach, but Mashiach is the iconic archetype figurehead of not only the nation, but each one of us as individual humans. It's all a fractal model. So if I say this is Mashiach, well, the word Mashiach can mean a few different things. One of which is anointed, but the other one means, as it were, mem shin, mush is where you get the word mushy, something feels. Mashiach has to do with feeling. And Shiach has to do with conversation or communication. So he came as the tangible communication. That's the word made flesh. That's the word mem shin yod het. But you wouldn't know that if all of you thought it meant was anointed. What I'm saying is this, there's a play on words. We're supposed to be the Word made flesh. Because humans were designed, remember, back to John 1:1, it was this Word, and the Word through which everything was made, and then he jumped in and became a human, because a human is the Word in flesh form. He just came pure, and we became corrupted. But we're supposed to be doing what he did. So this can mean Israel, and it can mean you. Or me. And that's the ideal. That's what we go for. So this is to comprehend the resurrection, or it's also this scepter of righteousness, because the word zadi means righteous. So to understand righteousness, so this word etz is not only the word tree. Remember when that guy had his eyes open and Yeshua put the mud on it and says, what do you see? He said, I see men like trees. So we think, oh, he must not have seen because his eyes were blurry, so they're just like trees. Or maybe when Yeshua opened his eyes, he saw a depth of reality that was beyond our normal seeing. And then Yeshua put something on again and he said, oh, now I see men like men. Wait a minute, did he open his eyes too much? Oh, we've got to bring you back a little seclusion, occlusion. Bring you back to where you can live in this land, because if you were seeing too much, it's like, oh, who can withstand the torments that it would be? But what I'm saying is that this same word not only means to take counsel, and the word tree, but it also means to close the eyes. The word for wood is lignify, so it means to turn into wood. Like petrify means turn to stone. This word can mean turn into wood. Now you can take all these things and say, well, what is this really saying? To see men like trees, what is that? That goes back to this model of the Psalmic, of the menorah. Men like trees. We're supposed to be bearing fruit. There's an insight. It's not just a distortion. A distortion meaning his eyes just weren't clear and he saw men as these fuzzy things. What I'm saying is that when you start looking into Hebrew, your mind can start rolling with all kinds of wonderful perspectives and insights that has to do with who we really are, what we're really doing here, and what time this really is. So here's the hope. Jesse was sitting here talking about how the Native Americans, as a people group, as a race, are the most suicidal, drunk, pointless lives. What is there to live for? This is not about saying, you guys should learn how to flip hamburgers so you have a job. You guys should learn how to paint houses so that you can have a job. You guys should learn how to mow the lawn so that you... It's not about that. It's not about restoring an old culture. Oh, how did your ancient ancestors used to live here? How did they used to live before they came over to America? Were they from, the Orient, or from Africa, or from Antarctica somewhere? It's not about restoring that ancient culture. This is about stepping into the future, because this is the doorway, the threshold. We stand at this threshold of occasion to wake up and be the people of Yahuwah, such as the world has never seen. And if this is the end of the 6th millennium, the threshold of the 7th, and then there's some debate, whether it's Joe Dumond or Michael Rood or various other people, we're somewhere around the threshold. The word Joseph, as I mentioned the other day, Yod, Vav, Samik, Pei. This word Seph, as in if you add the letter Resh, it's the word Sefer, which means book, which means to decode, to decipher, to know how to read, to put the picture together. It's to design the constellations, connecting dots. Something about what Yosef did, he had this insight, which is why he was known as Zaphnath Paneach. You could discover the word, and that's a whole other thing, or to look into it. But here's what I'm saying. This word Samik Pei also is threshold. Yeshua came as Ben Yosef. That's the suffering servant. There was some kind of a threshold going on. What was going on? That there was a threshold. Threshold is a door. No one gets to my Father's house except through me. You got to go through the threshold. Rico Cortez talks about the threshold covenant. There's all these other studies. But if you go back and you look in Leviticus 26, 5 times Yahweh says something about us getting punished. He gave us 4 doorways. 4 times he said, if you consider my words to be a bother, worthless, loathsome, like, you don't even want to hear those words, like what Mike was saying the other day, reek. We think, oh, that reeks, that's a foul stench. But the reek could be a very pleasant fragrance. And as he was saying last night, some people consider Yahweh's stuff to be a stench. We consider Yahweh's stuff to be this pleasant aroma, fragrance of just wonderful complexity. Everybody has a choice. We stand at this opportunity to say, if he's telling us we can come back, we can choose to find his stuff delectable, delightful. We could choose to be that people, or we can choose to throw this away. If you look at Leviticus 26, 4 times Yahweh says, if you think my stuff stinks, then like your vow, 7. Shavah, the word vow is 7, but 7 is also curse. And then he goes and he describes, which Joseph Dumond does this great study, 2300 Days of Hell, it's one of the books, Covenant of Abraham. But he goes into this study saying, this is what it's going to look like. And it gets worse and worse and worse. Then in Ezekiel chapter 4, Ezekiel was told to lay on his side 390 days. It was a prophecy a day for a year for the house of Israel, the northern house. 40 days on his other side for the southern kingdom, Yehudah. Well, when Daniel was in captivity, he was looking into the books, and Jeremiah said something about because they didn't keep the Shemitah year for 490 years, and it was once for every 7 years, and in 70 years they had to go into captivity to let the land rest. So Daniel calculated, chapter 9, that this time was up. Hey, this is the time. Hey, Yahweh, look it. You said, you made a deal. You made a contract with us, and you said 70 years. We've done our 70 years. We should get to come home. And Yahweh said, that's right. So Daniel prayed, and Yahweh said, okay, I'll give the decree to Cyrus, and he'll send you guys back. And they got to go back to Jerusalem. Woohoo! Just like Yahweh said, contract deal. What about the northern kingdom? Daniel calculated and prayed for the southern kingdom. What about the northern kingdom? Different timing. 390 years. Assyria took over Samaria in 721 BC. If 390 was the term for a doorway threshold to open to them, if you subtract 390 from 721, you get 331 BC. Right? So sometime around 331 BC, Israel, the northern kingdom, was given another opportunity to come back to the covenant. You know what was happening during that era? Alexander the Great. And right after that, the Maccabees. The Maccabees were more like 285 or so, but this was the time of Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great came in as for the vision that Daniel had seen, and he wiped out the Medes and the Persians, who had previously wiped out Babylon and who had wiped out Assyria, and Yahweh was pulling this curtain across the whole world, Middle East there, and I can only expect he gave his people a chance to come back. He freed them for their slavery to the Medes and the Persians at the time of Alexander. Did the northern tribes come back? Didn't come back. Okay, another 390. Well, this drops us into about 60 AD. What happened about 60 AD? That was right after Yeshua. And again, there might be a little fluctuation of years here, but approximately this time, this was 10 years before Rome came in, sacked the temple, and scattered everybody across the face of the earth and says, you're just not coming back. So something was happening. This was right in the midst of the time when the Ruach had been given to Yeshua's Talmudim, disciples, in about 30. So this was 30 years the Ruach had been doing his thing, opening up like a blossoming flower for 30 years amidst the Talmudim, the book of Acts. This is all book of Acts time. They were given another door. Did the northern kingdom take it? Remember, Yeshua said, I only come for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Now you think, oh, that's the Jews, that's the 12 tribes. No. Look at Jeremiah. There's the northern house of Israel known as Ephraim, and the southern house known as Yehuda. Some people don't like that talk, but that's in the scripture. You can research it for yourself. Somehow Yeshua came to offer the northern kingdom, Ephraim, the doorway back home, and apparently they didn't take it. They liked being known as Celts, and they became known as the Vikings. And when I say Celts, it's because the Hebrew word for the one sent into exile is Gimel Lamed, Gaul. Like the word Gaul, like those guys who settled in around France and Middle Europe. And the plural is Galut. Well, this is a vowel. If you take the vowel Alph, it's GLT, which is where we get the letter CLT, and stick in another vowel, that's Celt. The Celtic knot is a picture of the punishment his Israelites were sent on to wander aimlessly without a beginning or end and lose identity until the time they choose to wake up at the time of the end of the curse.
That's amazing. So you're saying every 390 years he gave him another opportunity?
5 times.
Woo!
4 times.
How did I miss that before?
Yeah, we won't go there yet.
Give me a look, okay.
Here, add another 390. What do you got? 450. What was happening around 450 AD? Remember, Constantine rolled in about 320 something. So this is about 100 and something years after Constantine. That was right at the beginning of the time of the Middle Ages and all, right? That was right around the end of the Western, or the Roman Empire as we know it.
The Celts kept the monastery, the libraries alive.
There's a book called How the Irish Saved Civilization by Thomas, starts with a C, I can't remember the last name. Great book. But the point is, right about this time, the Roman Empire as we know it disintegrated, and it was taken over by the hordes of the Europeans, known as the barbarians, that were actually the various tribes of Israel having lost their identity. So Yahweh, interestingly enough, used the paganized tribes of Israel come to destroy the people that had destroyed his nation. World history is kind of fascinating once you start looking behind the scenes. Okay, so here we have 1 door, 2 door, 3 doors, and if there's another door at another 390, it gives you 840. Well, that's one that throws you right into the Middle Ages, right? The time of, like, the knights in armor. And anyway, you can look back at world history is what I'm saying. And because they again said, no, we don't want to come back to the covenant, like, okay, you got the full 7. So if you say 7 times 390 equals 2,730 years. Well, if you take 2,730 from 721 BC, you get 2009, only there's no year 0, so it means it's 2010. 2010 then would be the fulfilling of the envelope of the curse that Yahweh said, you will be blind, ignorant, lost your identity, you forget I was ever your Elohim, that you were ever my people, scattered across the face of the earth, lied to, dominated, killed by your enemies, which includes the North American and South American continents being ravaged by wave after wave of conquistadors and butchers, as well as your
battles within their own culture.
constant.
Each other out. Absolutely.
Read Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28. It's the exact story of world history. Until the time of 2010. Well, that was 7 years ago. This is 2017. Somebody else, and I don't remember where this is, but somebody said, oh, there was another little rider stuck on of another 7-year curse. I can't identify where that is. I haven't bumped into it, and I don't remember what they told me. But even if so, boom, present tense. But wait a minute, we've got a little problem. Daniel, when he calculated the time, he, in Daniel 9, prayed to Yahuwah. And Yahweh said, hey, sure, you looked at what I said, you calculated the door, you calculated the terms of the covenant contract, you held me to my word, great, you guys are free to come back. That was for the southern kingdom. What about the northern kingdom, the 12 tribes? What happened? Did anybody do that?
Who's our Daniel? Who's the Cyrus that we go to who will finance our going back?
Did something happen in 2010? Do you remember? Interestingly enough, I was in Oregon, Portland, and I saw a guy, Christian, it's a wood shop, and he had a picture. It's like a 1,000,000-man Christian march on Washington, D.C. And I said, hey, what's this? He said, oh, I was there. That was 1997. And when I asked him, I said, did anything come of that? And he said, not that I know of. I mean, Bob was talking about that here the other night and saying people offered forgiveness to one another. But nothing else seemed to happen. Interestingly enough, the Assyrians had apparently, from what little I know of history, a 13-year siege where they started coming in and smacking Samaria, and then the full onslaught where they took over was in 721. But if there was a 13-year siege of progressive, if you minus 13 years from 2010, guess what? That's 1997. So something about 1997 was the beginning of the end of the curse.
Beginning of the 120th Jubilee cycle.
And there was an offer of forgiveness between people groups that had been pounding and butchering each other for all these years. But then what happened in 2010? Now, just to say, I make no claim for myself. But interestingly enough, somebody invited me, and there's 2 other men. We went to Jerusalem at Sukkot, the ingathering harvest festival of 2010. And we met up with Todd Bennett. There was 4 of us. And on the day of Shemini Atzeret, we had driven up to Shiloh, the place where the Mishkan stood. And we were just looking at it. And as the end of the day approached, it's like, boy, we're in a rented car. We got to get out of here. We're in Palestinian territory. Though it's Shiloh, the place where the Mishkan stood. And all I know is for myself, I felt this compelling to go stand on the very spot of the altar of incense. And the 4 of us men stood there with our hands up and outpoured, each of us praying virtually the same prayer of Daniel chapter 9 for the northern kingdom. Yahweh, forgive us. We were the criminals. We were the culprits. You have been true to your word. You said you would restore your favor. Please redeem us. Please bring us back. Please be true to your word. And I believe that the understanding of all this is, I made that chart in 2010, coincidentally. The chart talking about understanding the meaning of the letters of his covenant. All I can say is Shiloh, the place where the Mishkan stood for I think was 600 years, the very place where Yahweh said, because you have betrayed my word, you thought you'd turn the Ark of the Covenant into some sacred idol and scare the Philistines. They picked it up and took it out of there. They lost the battle, they lost the kingdom, and we went back to the place of the altar of incense, the prayers of the saints, representing communication between ourselves and Elohim. The altar of incense representing the pay of Sukkot, where the confederated tribes offer up their heart to Elohim in unity, walking with Him together. I mean, the symbolism here, we did. Did anybody else? Anywhere across the face of the earth? I don't know. That was Shemini Atzeret of 2010, the last festival of the Moedim. On the last day of 2,730 years of cursing for the shackle. This letter Kuf is drawn as could be drawn as a neck shackle, locked with a padlock. And the Zadi means to break open. Pei Zadi is open mouth. Kuf Zadi is open the shackle. Until the time that we wake up to the truth of His covenant, Yeshua being the Mashiach, and walk in His ways as He designed this place to be, and the shackle is now broken as of 2010, and even if there was another 7-year rider, okay, 2017, you are here at the right time, at the right place. What is in front of us has never been on the face of the earth since the day He made it. He's never had a people yet. Adam and Eve blew it. Cain blew it. All the way through the days of Noah, they blew it. Nimrod blew it. Abraham, it's not time yet. He brings them in. Days of Moses, they blew it. They blew it, they blew it, they blew it. David and Solomon, a spark, a glimmer, and then they blew it. Yeshua came offering the door, and they blew it, as we saw, for 2,000 years. And here we are. For somebody to say, oh, we've got trouble coming. So what? We've got the open shackle. What we need to do is say, what did He say? What did He say? We're right on the threshold. What's in front of us? It's not in front of us. It's here with us right now. This year, Sukkot 2017. Where are we? Who are we? It's not about dredging up old cultures. It's about dredging up the promises given to Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Moshe, David, Yeshua. They all pointed to us right now. The reconfederated 12 tribes, like the shining stones, each one doing what they were designed and meant to do. And I believe that the more we study every word, look at the names of the stones, look at the name of the tribes, look at the prophecies. If we have this crowded mind of persecution, tribulation, disaster, blah, 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 He said that's coming on the people that tormented His people, not us. He brought them into the promised land. I've given it to you. The cup of iniquity is full to the Canaanites. It's all yours. I'm going to go before you and just blow out the way. All but 2 men cowered in fear. And Yahweh says, according to what you believe, so be it unto you. According to what you say, that's what's going to happen. They kept saying, oh, you just brought us out here to kill us in the desert. And He said, all right, that's it. You're going to die in the desert, just like you said. Joshua and Caleb said, these guys, the word battle is lachem, so is the word bread. We have to go engage these guys in battle because Yahweh they're going to be bread for us. It's a play on words in Hebrew. The meaning of understanding what's going on is to understand Hebrew. There was a story in the scripture, I think it's in Chronicles, where a 1,000,000-man army was mustered from Africa. I think it was from Cush. How long does it take to muster a 1,000,000-man army? You got to birth an entire generation of approximately 20 to 30-year-olds, which means all the women have to make the food, and all the men have to learn to fight, and you have to get all these resources to make the weaponry, and you got to get all these animals to pull the carts, and to take the food, and go on a campaign from Africa. Maybe it was hundreds of miles, if not 1,000 miles, all the way up to the doors of Jerusalem, and they were going to come and tear this place apart. And the governors of Jerusalem said to Yahweh, you know, we deserve this. We've been stupid, we've been vile, we've betrayed you. But Yahweh, you're our Elohim. Please help. Not for our sake, but for your sake. We're your people. Please help us. And then Yahweh said, that's all I needed to hear. That night, I read this book about the matter. It's a historical matter. That night, mice got into their stuff and ate all the fabrics and all the scraps, and those guys woke up in the morning and all their stuff was laying on the ground. I mean, they couldn't even pick it up in their arms. And they panicked because they knew that some Elohim was against them, and they turned and ran. And then the army of Jerusalem always said, go get them. What? And they chased those guys out of the territory, and guess what? All those years of provisions, Yahweh used that 1,000,000-man army as a workforce to grow the food, to make all the weapons and implements, and bring them up and drop them at the door of Jerusalem, and then turn and run. He did the same thing when 185 Assyrians woke up dead in the morning. He did the same thing when they heard a loud noise and they all took off running. And the lepers came out and said, whoa, look at this stuff. This is the kind of stuff our Elohim will do. But we have to know his identity and trust him and go forward with the bravado of courage of Joshua and Caleb. Caleb meaning all heart, Joshua meaning Yahweh saves. To have the fortitude of our inner disposition with full heart, believing that Yahweh saves his people and we choose to be his people. Therefore, those are the stories we look at. Those are the things we choose to believe and conduct ourselves with that frame of mind, that consciousness, because it's the other stuff, the tribulation and the torment and the ruin that he certainly did impose for 2,730 years, and he certainly will impose on our enemies, but it doesn't have to be us. And for us to stand here and suddenly see this. One more little thing I want to add on to this before we end, I think in a matter of time, is that when he calls himself Yahweh Elohim Zavot, he calls himself Zavot. The word is spelled Zadi, Bet, Aleph, Vav, Tav. What I remember as a kid in Presbyterian church, Martin Luther's song, Mighty Fortress is our God, Lord Sabaoth is he. He pronounced it Sabaoth. And it's like, is that a weird way of saying Sabbath? Lord of the Sabbath? Well, maybe. I mean, he's the Lord of the Sabbath. But here, this is what they did. This is pronounced TZ, and they replaced it with an S. This is a B, this is an A, and this is an O or a U. It's also a V or W, but in this case it's just, and then this is a T. Sabaoth. The word Sabaoth is a perversion of the phonetics of Sabaoth. What does this mean? If you look up in the dictionary, Zadi Bet is a turtle or a covered wagon or that which inflates like a balloon. So this means to inflate. Zadi Bet Aleph is an army. So if you get a whole bunch of guys together, now you've inflated. You've got an army. If you look at this word, Aleph Vav Tav, as we looked at the other day, if you put a yod here, it's the word me. If you put a kaf here, it could be the word you. If you look at Aleph connected to the Tav, that's something about the Aleph Tav covenant that Yeshua claimed to be the embodiment of. But this word oath is a sign, a symbol, something which represents the terms of agreement. Terms of agreement. It's also the letters of the, and here I just write Aleph Bet, shorthand, AB. Each letter of the alphabet is a note, like a note. Each letter of the alphabet. So we could read this, that each letter of the alphabet is a symbol of the army of Yahuwah that he is going to inflate. Well, if you take a picture of a balloon, this little balloon, oh, that's not much. If you could blow up this balloon and it turns into like one of the Macy's Day Parade, these giant big Zeppelin dirigibles, wow! What is each one of these letters? We have no idea. But each one of these letters might just represent the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Outer Space Force, the Submarine Force, the Coast Guard Force, the National Homeland Security Force. Well, that's only 7. He's got 22 of them. Legions of his military divisions. And every single one of them, their job is to enforce the words of the Torah fully in league with the Ruach because Yeshua is their commander. And all those forces are here to make sure that we are defended and championed according to the exact terminology of every single word he said, identified and understood by the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. To learn Hebrew is to understand who we are, where we are, and what he's doing, and it has nothing to do with the NWO, the US, the UK, the UN, the USSR, Rocket Man, or anybody else with all their intentions. Yahweh says he laughs and scoffs at the intentions of man, but he gave us 2,730 years to be brutalized by our enemies, and then he said, when my people wake up and turn back to me, then they'll know what I mean when I say Yahweh Zevot. He's going to pour out his compassion, his mercy, his grace, his favor on us, and pour out his venomous wrath on the people that took advantage of us while we were in our ignorance. This is an incredible occasion to be here and to be brought to the awareness of what these words mean.
You done?
I think I'm done. You got something to say?
Somebody blow a shofar.
Which is to translate, Hodul Ayawaki Tov, Ki Leolam Chazdo.